Hello, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Hayley Carpenter. It's always lovely to have another female on the podcast. I think I say this every time I have a female because it's quite rare. But we did get to have a catch up previously, Hayley, and I'm really interested to chat to you all things conversion rate optimization today, because I think you've got some fascinating, slightly disruptive views that I think our audience would really, really welcome. You obviously have founded Chirpy, a conversion rate optimization agency, pretty much a new breed of agency, because we think of agencies in the space, we think of, creative, digital, channel, demand gen. There aren't many of you in conversion rate optimization, so you are really leading the charge from that perspective. And I do know from having chatted to you and also reading a bit about Chirpy that you set up the agency because you felt like there was a big gap in how businesses were being served from a conversion rate optimization perspective. So I guess, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Second of all, can you tell us a bit about Chirpy? And also, can you tell us how you ended up in the conversion rate optimization space as well? I always think that's a really fascinating question to ask.
Yeah, so you nailed the intro. Thank you. That was lovely. Very accurate. But yeah, Chirpy, I really wanted to step out and do something different. When I say different, I feel like that is a cliche thing to say. I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm doing something different. You're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Because that's what everyone says. And I have no shame in admitting that I don't fully know what different means yet. But what I tell people and anyone that I start working with, I'm going to figure that out along the way. And I'm fully confident that I'm going to be able to do that. And I already run things differently and have, from a consulting perspective, and how I run my engagements, differently. But Chirpy is my baby. I knew that I wanted to go out on my own really since day one of starting in CRO, which I'll touch on. So it was just time to bring that to fruition in early last year. And in my entire career, I've curated very specific experience in roles and company choices and who I was working with or under. And that was all intentional to get me to the place of being able to open Chirpy. So that's that. I do consulting, execution, and training in CRO. And as you were saying, it is, niche. There aren't a lot of CRO agencies, but from day one of being in digital, CRO is really what spoke to me. I'm a mega CRO nerd. It's what I geek out on. And I really don't have that much passion for the other things that you were saying. So, niching down is intentional for a number of reasons, but mostly just because that's what I geek out on and that excites me. So, I'm hoping to grow it, and I work with only really large enterprises, but any industry and lead gen and e-com. So that's that as far as how I got into the space. I'll try and recap it quickly, but it was really just a major accident. I did not know what I wanted to do, never even heard of the digital space, CRO, PUC, anything like that. But toward the end of my college career, I was looking for just a part-time gig to bring in some extra money, maybe get my foot in the door for something after graduation. Looked at things on Indeed, as you do, found an exec admin assistant job at a digital agency, had no idea what those were about, Googled every single acronym and just tried to quickly learn things before that interview. Somehow I landed that and ultimately rolled my way into CRO at that first agency out of being an exec admin. So when I say I started from the ground up and started at the bottom of the corporate ladder, I really worked every role and grinded in every role from the bottom up.
Yeah.
But that's what got me here. So, that was a perfect journey for me. So now
yeah, I can advocate for going on that journey, because I think, especially in a space that is, so data driven as CRO, you need to know it all. Then you can spot things. No one can ever pull the wool over your eyes. Like you're just switched on to the right things all the time if you've gone like through that learning curve. So yeah, I really appreciate how you got there. Few questions around conversion rate optimization. So particularly in B2B, but I think across all organizations, obviously, conversion rate optimization is advanced and very developed in spaces like e-commerce. But in other industries, it is still relatively new. And as a marketer coming to their board, coming to their CMO and going, right, I think we need to do things differently here. It can require a significant cultural change. And for this reason, there may be certain types of businesses that CRO is a no-brainer for, that you just go, yeah, absolutely, it's always going to work for you. And others where you would say there are things that you should perhaps be exploring first. If you think about this, I suppose I'm thinking about our listeners who are mostly B2B marketers. So if you think about it under the lens of where they might be coming from, can you share some thoughts on the characteristics that would make a business a good candidate for CRO?
Oh, yes. I'm going to call out, not to call you out, but I'm going to just call out the word always. Of who might CRO always work for or be good for, who might it never work for and be good for. It's tough to use those words in CRO, and I think people like to use those words, but CRO is really very gray. It's, in my opinion, not something where we can often say the words always and never. People try a lot, but it's always really, really specific to each individual business. And when I start working with someone, or we're, let's say, talking, can you do CRO? I would always want to investigate further, because in my head, everyone can do CRO, every business, every company, startup to huge enterprise. It's just at what level and what pieces can you do? But there's always something that you can do. E-com versus B2B, I would say one of the biggest differences there would be traffic volume, conversion volume. And that really is what, in my head, is a first stepping stone into can you do CRO and what can you do or not. And I think particularly with research, that might be a scenario where you can almost say always. I still hate to, say that, but like research, I would say most businesses can and should be doing. Again, it depends on what type and whatnot. There are nuances to that. But as far as testing specifically goes, relative to B2B in particular, I would say the data volume there is really more of the struggle around testing of whether or not B2B can move forward in that lane of CRO. That's not to say that that's not a concern for e-com either. Sometimes, again, it's just everyone's case by case. But really, and that's how I start any conversation of we want to test, can we test? It's like, okay, well, the first step really is looking at the data volume, because there's a misconception, well, many actually, around testing, and that, well, we want to, so we can, and we're going to, and we want to test everywhere, and we would like to have 100 tests a year and, whatever, and this is what we want to test. And you're just like, no, that is not how it works. It isn't what you want to do, you feel, you think. It's, no, do you have the data volume? If yes, then we can use that as a jumping point to what can you test, where can you test, how do you test, how long, and answer things like that, which again are based on particular data points of not just like, this is what we would love to test, and we think it's going to do really well here, here, and here, and we want to move fast, so we would really like to run it for just 2 weeks because 8 is too long. And you're like, well, that's really not how it works either. So it is, there's a lot of cultural things going on as well too. not just specific to B2B, but it's the conversation of, can we test? What kind of research can we do? But also, how does using this data work? Culturally, how is that integrated into our mindset? One particular example would be speed. A lot of people want to move as fast as they can. And there's a cultural element there of like, well, here's how testing works. So we need to shift, there are all kinds of elements that tie in there. But really, I think for B2B specifically, do you have enough data volume would be a starting question in my head, or at least what does it look like?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I really picked up on your point about CRO. It is grey and it is different for every business, but I think that is something that businesses and marketers, especially today, struggle with. And I've got some points to ask you about that, because I think we're scared of doing something grey. Like I definitely think that if we can go, it's black and white, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And so I can guarantee to my boss, I'm going to get this. I'm much more confident in doing it. If you tell me something's grey, it's going to make me more hesitant.
I have a couple thoughts on this. Follow up that. If we have time, I won't do.
We have time, yeah.
Right. So I think that is one key point that speaks to in my head, because the industry is so niche in CRO, it's so multidisciplinary. It is very gray and much of an art and science. I'm not saying this just because I do it. I own an agency. This is not a sales related comment relative to me. It's just general advice that I give everyone, in that if you're looking to do CRO, the person or the people doing it are so important. And not that doesn't apply to things like PPC or creative, but for example, like a common case is they'll have someone junior running it, or they'll have the PPC person start running CRO, or they hire an agency and they get sold, and they're like, oh, senior, whatever. And then you get junior people, or you have junior people working in the background. I'm not saying that as a slight to people just entering the industry and that you can't ramp up and do the work, but expertise in CRO is so important. And even when I was more junior in this, I would fight people like, no, I have just as much experience. I'm checking all these boxes of knowledge and things that I'm learning. It's just time, though, and experience and exposure is everything. And who you learn under and how you learn, because this isn't a slight either to anyone, but there are a lot of people doing really terrible CRO work. And frankly, I think a lot of people don't even know it, which I don't blame them. It's not their fault, but it's not, I always say, it's not like there's a degree for this, right? Like there's no medical school. There are no textbooks that we're all learning out of that are definitive, or it's not like becoming a lawyer, where you have all these books of codes and we can all follow those. And everything is really an art and science, but those are, I would say, like much more clear cut, if I had to guess, whereas as CRO, there's not really a degree for it. There's not a particular school for it. And not only that, but then there's gray area within the discipline, even once you learn it. So take that for what it's worth. But as far as like the black and white and justifying the value and whatnot, again, that comes down to experience and expertise and how you can pitch it or pivot it or, talk about it. And that really, I believe, is what does help eliminate a lot of uncertainty and fear around perhaps taking a risk. Because really, CRO, a big part of it is risk mitigation. So in my head, that's a backwards perspective to be scared of it or not see value. So I'll stop on my tangent, but I just had to say a couple of things relative to that.
No, it completely makes sense. And I think while you were talking, I was like, oh, like as marketing leaders and CMOs, it is our responsibility to become educated on these things, because we are probably the only ones who can have that senior level conversation with finance, with the board or whoever it is that we want to get funding from to undertake this program, and also to manage it when it's not a quick fix, because we don't, it's not, it is it's a cultural change, like we talked about earlier, and we can't give it to someone junior and then just lay it on them. They are going to make poor decisions, and the website is like, it's the place that a buyer goes at the beginning, the middle, the end of the journey. Like, we can't afford to do things that certainly haven't been researched and aren't strategic. So it just made me think, like, we need to get more and more educated at a high level, I think.
And I really, really hope that over the coming years, one evolution of CRO will be to get more product team members into CRO right out of the gate, in line with marketers, because usually I would say I see that CRO starts more on the marketing side. But one other misconception is that CRO is just marketing, or in rare cases, perhaps it's more of a product focus.
Yeah.
But CRO affects the entire company, which is another mindset shift that I'm work hard to make. But yeah, it's if you have to pick teams, I really hope product gets more involved in the conversation in the coming years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So going on that thread, like the fact that many of us assume that CRO is a quick fix. One of the failings that many businesses make is at that ideation stage, when they're going, right, what should we do? Oh, I know, I think this might work, or I tried this before, let's give this a go. And they use personal beliefs or thoughts or opinions to form ideas for their experiments, rather than have them as research based. Now, you have a very wide ranging and detailed research process to create an effective strategic approach. Can you talk us through some of the methodologies that you recommend and use for your clients? What are most effective? And if a business is going down that route, do they need to invest in tools, or can they do a lot of it without investing in tech and software?
Oh, such a big can of worms. Actually, it's many cans of worms. I'll try and talk about as many as I can and as much as I can. But really, I think one thing that a lot of companies aren't aware of, or don't think about, or just know about, is that at a high level, CRO really is a systematic, process-driven playbook that you can set up and get running, and it just continues to go, for in perpetuity, hopefully. Part of that being research, which research should also be systematically done. There's the big machine of CRO, and then there's a bunch of little machines or pieces in that giant machine. So research is one of those. And like I was saying earlier, I really think that nearly every business can do some form of research, no matter how much data volume you have, big, small, whatever. And really, it is very shocking to me still how many businesses are not doing the type of research that we frequently do in CRO. They're not aware. They don't have knowledge. And I feel like for years, it's been like data-driven, big data. And it's still at such a fundamental level. I feel like just generally across businesses, most businesses, I will say, in the research conversation have analytics. Great. Yeah. They're like, we're doing research. We have analytics. Like, you're like, that's great. Good starting point.
Yeah.
However, a problem with that one is that a lot of those setups are broken to some extent, varying degrees. So the data is either trash and you can't even trust it at all. So then you have nothing.
Yeah.
It's partially there. So again, can't trust it. Sometimes it is set up well and you can trust it, which, that's a great starting point. But I'm like, analytics is table stakes. In my head, if you're doing only analytics, you're not doing research, because everyone has it. Like, that's just baseline. But again, like on the topic of test ideation and research, I don't think the dots are being connected still industry-wide that you have to have research and that test ideation is data driven. It's not just let's all sit around a table and group think a bunch of ideas and then we're solid and have a really strong list of things to test. That's not how it works. So like, for example, we have like heat maps, session recordings. We do use analytics data, of course, don't get me wrong, but unmoderated, moderated user testing, customer interviews, journey mapping, social monitoring, diary studies, scraping of reviews. There's so many things. And it's not just numbers, it's quant and qual data. You should absolutely have both, particularly the qual data, where I like to think about these as like quant data is more, it's numbers. Qual data to me is words. And there are so much valuable, juicy information that you can glean from doing all of these things. CRO and testing aside, like if you're a business and you're not talking to your customers and you're not hearing what they're saying, what are you doing? Because that's vital, in my opinion, to growth and gains. And yeah, so anyways, I'll stop my soapbox there. But back for ideation, those things feed what we should be changing. So, oftentimes the team coming up with the ideas is way too close to their product or wherever they're testing and stuff. Or, they're not their target audience. They're not buying what they're selling. So I'm not saying that team ideas and hippo ideas aren't valuable and that we shouldn't listen to them or include them or put them in the framework or whatever. But I really don't care as much what you as a team think you should do better from like a test ideation perspective, at least all the time, right? Like, and I need your input still, regardless of where the ideas come from, whether it's research or your brain. But I more care about what our customers are saying, what the data says definitively, and how we can even cross-analyze. So maybe I find something in user testing that I can then echo in analytics, that I can also then echo in journey mapping. And all of this is strengthening every piece of what we're doing. And if that validates something that the team came up with, great. But I'm not just going to stop at you guys said or you collectively want. Like, let's try and back that up then. With other things. And if a team is like, well, we don't have time, we just want to go, we're like, all right, and you can try and talk them into stuff, but really it's worth the extra time, the resources. For some of these, you don't need tools that are paid. You can get some free tools out there. Some of the tools are definitely paid. So it is another investment. Like, you buy a testing tool, you have people spending their salary time or whatever running this stuff. That's always a conversation. Like, CRO is an investment. It's a long-term investment. You have to understand the game of get the game. It's a long-term game that you're playing. You can get some short, quick wins, but also it takes time. So again, it takes an experienced person who understands all of these different elements, can piece them together, put together strategically that systematic setup, short-term, midterm, long-term, talk to stakeholders appropriately. And then that's also where it's really important that the program is successful, because if you start it, you have to be able to continue and to get continued investment, which, if all of your shit is failing, that's going to be difficult to justify. So,
So, the qual piece, I think, is the part that we tend to be more afraid of, perhaps because we don't necessarily understand how best to use it, and obviously it doesn't give us as wide a reach or as much. We get certainty from numbers, don't we? So we go, oh that's lots of people who have done that, but things like the customer journey mapping, the heat maps, the user testing, a lot of that is really good qual data. How do you then take that into like the next meeting you have and really pick that apart?
I'm going to say this probably so many times, and I don't mean it in any type of way relative to myself or my own skills. It's just like generally what I think about anyone doing this stuff. This is where expertise comes in. Like, you have to know how to properly analyze these data sets. You have to know what you're looking for. You have to know how to articulate it in a readout in storytelling. what to systematically do with the outputs and how to use them so they don't just sit and get wasted. But like, heat maps and session recordings and things like that. I've seen all kinds of ways that those have been analyzed. I specifically want to touch on, though, like polls and email surveys, for example, like those are more where you're getting a bunch of words. Heat maps in my head is more of a quant data set, just because it is aggregating volume of clicks and scroll percentages and things like that. You just have to know how to read the cool maps that it outputs, and how those numbers behind the scenes are being interpreted into what you're seeing visually. But like polls and surveys, voice of customer data, it's really cool because you can actually turn qualitative data into quantitative data. So you can turn words to numbers, which you're right. People gravitate toward numbers because it seems clearer. It's what people are more familiar with. It's really what people get taught in school of how to analyze. So this is one way that it really lands better and people see the value more in qual research. And it's a cool coding process that you can go through to do that. It's just, again, like you have to know the process and have been like taught that or found out and, teach yourself. But then, you can put that into a readout. I do, again, like I'm not trying to sell myself here, but just like there's a free training video that I have on my website, mychirpy.com. It's under quick vids. It's 11 minutes, I think. And I show exactly how to turn qual to quant data because I think it's so important. And I think a lot of people haven't been taught how to do it, but it's so easy. And like, it doesn't even take a tool. It just takes a spreadsheet. That's it. So.
Brilliant. That's great. What can you just repeat the that link again, just in case?
Totally. Yeah. So my website's mychirpy.com.
Yeah.
And then go to the resources tab. And I believe it's under quick vids. I can confirm that right now. You'd think I would know for sure off the top of my head.
It sounds like a really useful resource. So
I lied. It's under the training. So you go to mychirpy.com, resources, trainings, and it'll be right there. Yeah. And it's about 11 minutes.
Yeah. So it's really important that we, as a CRO team or guys working on CRO, whether we're in product or we're in marketing, that we get access to that customer data to be able to talk to customers. And I think sometimes, I don't know how you've experienced that, but sometimes the rest of the business can have their arms wrapped around that a bit too tightly. You've got customer success, we need that data. We can't keep talking to those customers because we're doing this with them. And product are like, well, we need this over here. So if we're going to do CRO, we've got to have it really clear. We have to talk to our customers. Like, we've got to get that data that's going to inform what we do.
100%.
Okay, so going back to, because exciting what you said about turning qual data into quant, because we do gravitate towards numbers and measurement. Measurement is a super, super hot topic in CRO, and one that I wanted to explore with you because I have seen actually a number of digital experience providers talking about different ways to measure success in CRO. And you're really, really clear about the fact that CRO absolutely has to be about bottom line metrics like leads, because ultimately, why are we doing it? Like, we're not doing it to make ourselves feel good. We're doing it to drive more revenue into the organization, and that we shouldn't be using vanity metrics as a measure of success. I'd really be interested to hear more about why you feel so strongly about that. And then I also wanted to ask, I guess, from my own perspective, because it can take a while to see results. Sometimes the vanity metrics are our only leading indicator. And is it wrong to even use those to go, I think we're on the right track?
I get so heated about this topic. It is, I would say, my most passionate topic potentially of CRO. Yeah, and I can get heated about it because I feel so passionately about where I stand. So there are really two parties, I believe, in CRO when it comes to success and how to measure that, what your metrics should be, just high level, particularly for testing. We have, primary metrics, secondary metrics. Maybe you even go as far to break out tertiary. I don't do that, but maybe you do. But really, I would say mostly this conversation applies to primary metrics and what you're going to use in a test, but then a level up. How are you going to measure success of your program overall, aka specifically the aggregate output of the tests? Yes, we have research, but really in this conversation is more about tests. And there are two parties. So my party, like you said, is using more bottom line down funnel metrics. Where's the money at? Show me the money. That's why we're all here. That's what keeps the doors open. And then there's the other party where, maybe sometimes they use down funnel metrics. Maybe they never use down funnel metrics. They use what we call vanity metrics or higher funnel metrics. And that could be things like page views, button clicks, click-throughs, video views, crap like that. I'll try to curse too much. Stuff like that. I call those bullshit metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if I'm not supposed to curse on this podcast, but for emphasis, that is what I call them.
Yeah.
And my party would be more like transactions, leads, form submissions, MQLs, revenue. Granted, you're not going to do it on revenue alone. That's another conversation, but money metrics. And really, people will make the argument on the other side, the vanity metrics. One, we can test faster because higher up the funnel, you're going to have more volume. So we can go faster, conclude faster. Whereas if we wait for transactions, or let's say we're B2B and we track cohorts, and let's say the cycle for sales is 6 months and we're tracking a cohort, 6 months, we're waiting. That's so long. We'll just go with, button clicks, whatever. Or even in that case of B2B, we'll just go with form submissions and never look at MQLs, SQLs, ARR, whatever, because that just takes so long. Or, a lot of times they don't have tracking, which is a bummer, another conversation. But that is complete baloney to me, to be like, we can go faster. Or let's say you do the calculations to see test viability with transactions, and they're like, well, we can't even test if we use transactions, so we have to use higher funnel metrics because that's what will allow us to do it. I don't really even think that's a valid argument. I also feel that is kind of BS as well, because I will explain. Like I said, CRO is an investment. It takes a lot of funding. Even if you have a small program, it takes funding to a level.
Yeah.
You go and you try and either pitch first out of the gate. You're just now getting CRO stood up, and you're not basing your program on actually making more money, and you're not looking at that primarily. That, or other scenario, you're like a year, 2 years, whatever, into your program, and then you go ask for more investment. You're like, we want to continue, and you use those higher funnel metrics. No one cares. No one cares. I don't care. You shouldn't care. You should just care about, are you going to have more salary to keep going? And what brings in salary? Dollar bills. That's what does. So, and secondary, the second argument is, you can have an increase in those higher funnel metrics and still have a decrease in money metrics. So, you could run, let's say, 6 months of tests using these higher funnel metrics, and your conversion rate is tanked. And you're like, what happened? I have all of these winning tests. And you're like, well, you didn't use the right metrics. No one cares, and it's failing or whatever. And that happens too. I'll say that this really applies often more in marketing team conversations, not as much in product team conversations because it's a little bit of a different beast, but still relevant. It just is different nuances. So I will caveat it with that. But, I get very passionate. Some teams I've had, just no matter what I say, they don't come over to my party. And that's fine. If I don't work with them anymore, like long term, I'm like, okay, well, I know eventually you're going to hit a wall and you're going to come over to my party. That's fine. But I think really like the two reasonings of like, no one gives a crap at the end of the day, unless it's related to dollar bills. And two, you can have increases in higher funnel metrics and still have decreases in those dollar bill metrics.
Yeah.
When you explain it in that fashion, I do get a lot of people like, oh, right. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense as to why, if we don't have enough data volume for the lower funnel metrics, we just won't test there. That to me is like a non-viable swim lane. You just don't, even if you have the higher funnel metrics, whereas like some teams choose to do it anyways, like I was saying. So yeah, there are all kinds of perspectives. It really just depends on who you talk to, but I stand very firmly in my party.
Yeah, I mean, I can back you up on that. We've had customers in the past who have set up what they've called conversion led tracking, and they will track everything that they think is important. So like you said, oh, I want to see if they watch a video or they download an ebook or, they visit this particular high intent page. And we had a situation where we could see that the version that we'd worked on wasn't performing better than the other version. So, just to save what we're doing, I was like, right, well, let's just look at what's really, really important. And of course, it was the demo requests. That's what we care about, right? I was like, let's strip everything else away. And when we did, here's what happened. The conversion went up. So that might not always happen with the test, but in this particular case, we were hiding a winner because the higher vanity metrics were better when we hadn't changed anything. We hadn't made the experiment. When we took those out, the experiment performed, but we could have been making so many wrong decisions for the organization. So I can definitely back you up that happens there. And we see with our customers, like they want to measure things right the way through to revenue now. They don't even just want to measure leads and demo requests. They want to take it right through to revenue because that's what is expected of us. So it completely makes sense. I'm in your party. Is what I
love it. Not that I need people to agree, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Oh, well, finally, then I just wanted to touch base on forecasting, because obviously we started off by saying, CRO is grey. It's different for every organization. Research. So there are no guarantees, and that can make it really difficult for a business to get this underway because you can't forecast. You can't say, well, we're going to do this and it's going to deliver this. So how do you get an organization to buy into CRO and set those objectives that you can measure success on?
Great question. I do want to preface this by saying I say forecasting is baloney for CRO. I will not do it. I just straight up refuse to my clients if they ask for it. And even in the kind of discovery process of talking with someone to see if they're a fit, and they ask me about forecasting, I'm like, I will not do it. So, if that is a requirement for your CRO person, we're not a fit.
Yeah.
And I always say, I flag that as a cultural problem. That's something that we can work on, but, I won't do it. And I won't do it pre-test. I won't do it, in type of sales process. I won't do it post-test. I'm not going to annualize test revenue projection. That's silly. Because I have yet to see a model that is legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
People, particularly like agencies, love to do forecasting because it makes their sales easier. It's what people want. It resonates. They want to see or use annualized test projections because it looks great in case studies and sales material. Isn't it tempting? Wouldn't we all love to have that? But it's baloney. And I get in conversations with people, this is not a slight to anyone, but at, conferences or whatever, forecasting comes up and I state my opinion where I think it's baloney. And I'm like, okay, well, what models are you using? You've annualized X, you've predicted X for a program. Like what model are you using? I was like, I haven't seen one. I'll change my opinion, but I just haven't seen a model that's legit. Every time I have asked people this, they agree that their model is made up and baloney. They're like, oh, we just, I don't know. We just have it. Like, it's just kind of like guesses. You're like, okay, well then don't do it. I haven't seen one. I'll change my mind. If anyone has a model, come to me. I would love to see it. Part of this preface was, I'm not saying that forecasting in business and industries, like generally, obviously it's like a very common thing to do. I'm not saying don't do it ever. But like even in a totally different industry, in transportation for a city, I was talking to someone who does just forecasting. And I was like, well, I explained to her this issue that we're talking about right now relative to CRO. And I was like, what is forecasting for you? Because I have only seen that they're wrong, that they're not legitimate. And I was like, just, you have a PhD. You're doing this, totally outside of my type of, like, she was like, oh yeah, it's kind of still all just BS. Like, I mean, we have to do it and we have to present, but like, it's just, I'm like, great. This is validating what I see and what I say all the time. So thank you. And I don't have a PhD in stats. I tell that to everyone, like that's, this stupid AI camera. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So for what it's worth, but I think it's a cultural issue if forecasting is really something that the team is harping on, especially if leadership won't greenlight anything or is only basing success based on particular annualizations or only greenlighting CRO, as a starting point with like particular, how much revenue will this get us if we invest X? So I think that comes through like education, knowledge. Step one, explain what we're talking about right now of how like, anyone can give you numbers. Like if that is comfy to you, I understand, but that actually should be less comfy to you because it's entirely made up. And part two, if someone's giving that to you in confidence and not explaining this side of the story, you should actually be more concerned because they're kind of lying to you. That's my opinion. That might be harsh, but that's my opinion. So, explain this. And I would say, oftentimes when I've just said a hard no, explain why I won't do this, people are like, oh, okay, yeah, like that makes sense. And then we can pivot, and you explain how you still have revenue numbers and you still have these money metrics that we just talked about. This is what you should latch onto. And this is what we get in the tests. So we can absolutely lean on this data from when the test was live only, not before and after. But, again, like knowledge. And then, if you get them into the program, then you start talking about the research and confidence that comes from research into the test ideas. And you explain the short, mid, and long-term game and what we're trying to look for. If you have case studies as a company, great. Although I'll say like the stats in those can be questionable. So if you're looking at case studies, see if you can get your hands on the stats. But yeah, it's really, I don't know if that helps at all. But
well, I think what it says is that like what you're saying is that it is a cultural issue. If we can't do anything without a forecast, then we're not giving our people the opportunity to innovate because not everything is going to perform. And, we will have to fail to find the things that work. So I think we need to have organizations that are more open to letting their team try and fail without berating them and them not feeling that they can take something forward without, and I'm going to get this back, means that
yes,
exists.
Exactly. Yes, you have to allow room for innovation in particular, which is a whole other can of worms because that's a lane of CRO on its own. But absolutely. Yeah. And this, frankly, like, is where part of the long-term game conversation comes in, because you could start CRO and it could fail for 6 months. You could go 6 months, you could go however long and not have a winning test. But what I always say is, like, you have to, assuming you have someone or a team who knows what they're doing, you have to trust the process and the system of CRO, because eventually you will get a green line. You will have the hockey stick or whatever. Like, you're going to end up in the green. It just takes patience, understanding, knowing these different pieces. Granted, it can go very badly if you have people who don't actually know what they're doing. Then you're going to have a red downward trend and it's not going to go up. But, absolutely.
And I think, I wrote down when you were talking earlier the word patience, because I think that is the problem. We do have to have patience. And you know what? We might miss out on something amazing if we don't, because we just throw, I think you called it spaghetti.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like we just, hopefully something will work. But you know what? If it doesn't and it's all red, then something that could have been amazing, we're never going to get to do again, because we've scorched that. That's it. Like, it's gone. So yeah, we need to look after CRO when we get the opportunity to do it, and be patient with it.
Patience is key.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hayley, for chatting to me today. If our listeners, which I can imagine many of them might want to reach out to you, ask you about your agency services, or just for any advice, where should they reach you?
You can email me at hayley@mychirpy.com, DM me on LinkedIn, or connect on LinkedIn. I love that. Please reach out. I love chatting to people. I love hearing from people, whether you're interested in my services or not. Thank you for having me. This was so fun. This is one of my favorite chats I've had. I loved it. So yes, thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you, Hayley.
Yeah, bye.